Welcome. I'm Antonio Villaraigosa, Mayor of the City of Los Angeles. I'd like to invite you to watch and listen to this fascinating video about Los Angeles' #1 historical landmark. Come and share the legend, the story of Leonis Adobe. The San Fernando Valley more than 300 years ago was once the free land of the Chumash and the Tongva Indian tribes. Flat land surrounded by rolling hills and mountain ranges, the area was a grazing land for sheep, goats, and longhorns. In a 1769 expedition, Captain Gaspar de Portola and Father Juan Crespi claimed the land for Spain and named the area El Valle de Santa Catalina de Bononia de los Encinos, the Valley of the Oaks. Wagon trains and travelers passing through would water their horses and rest beneath the shade of clustered trees at a natural spring. Soon after, missions were founded up and down the coast of California along El Camino Real. Among those founded was the Mission San Fernando Valley de España in 1797, and from that time forward, the area was known as the San Fernando Valley. In 1845, Governor Pio Pico divided much of the land to the hardworking laborers of the mission, including two Chumash Indian brothers, Oden and Urbano, who acquired the western end of the San Fernando Mission property known as El Escorpión. And now you're going to hear about what it was like living here in the late 1800s from someone who was living on this ranch since he was 3 years old.
Hello, my name is Juan Menendez and welcome to the Leonis Adobe. My grandfather was Odin, the chief of the Chumash village of Huam. His daughter, my mother, was Maria Espiritu de la Santa Chiuya, who eventually inherited El Escorpión Rancho from her father. El Escorpión Ranch covered an area bounded roughly by today's Valley Circle Boulevard on the west, Calvert Street on the south, near Wood Lake on the east, and Sherman Way on the north. This is the story of the history of my family and our beautiful home, the Leonis Adobe. My father passed away when I was 3 years old, and my mother found it difficult to run the ranch on her own. A man named Miguel Leonis had recently acquired the land north of El Escorpión. He saw an opportunity to expand his ranch by marrying my mother.
Well, it was more of a business agreement.
Miguel Leonis stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and was known for his great physical strength and strong business skills.
Leonis came from an area near the border of Spain and France called the Basque region. He came from a well-respected family, but his father became disgraced by his actions when Leonis started smuggling. His father forced him to leave the country. Miguel immigrated to Los Angeles in 1858 and went to work for Joaquin Romero, who owned a ranch north of Ranchero El Escorpión. The ranch fell into disrepair as Romero grew older. He sold the property to Leonis, who soon turned the land and livestock around and ultimately prospered greatly. In 1862, the United States Congress passed the Homestead Act that enabled anyone to claim unoccupied public land provided they lived on and made improvements to that property. Miguel took advantage of this opportunity by grazing his sheep on public land, building a makeshift shack, and then claiming the land as his own. In a short time, Leonis amassed thousands of acres and became one of the richest ranchers in the area. Leonis became known as the King of Calabasas, and although he was highly respected for his shrewd land deals, he was despised by many and became one of the most feared men of the West. Sometime in the 1860s, Miguel Leonis discovered this abandoned adobe in the area known as Calabasas and made it his home. It is unknown who actually built this two-story structure.
The original ranch house and barn stood at the north end of El Escorpión Ranch, near the entrance to Bell Canyon, just beneath the mountain known today as Castle Peak. It kind of looks like a scorpion, don't you think?
Leonis, often called El Vasco Grande, employed a small posse of men to protect his property and keep squatters from claiming his land as their own. A fierce battle once took place between a couple of Civil War veterans and Miguel's posse. Eventually, this band of squatters realized they were no match for El Vasco Grande, and they quickly fled the area.
Calabaza is Spanish for pumpkin. It is believed that this area got its name when a farmer who was passing through on a wagon filled with fresh pumpkins had a slight mishap.
The wheel of the wagon broke loose, and the pumpkins fell onto the road. After time, the pumpkin seeds took root, and wild pumpkins grew alongside the road, and Calabasas got its name. As a little boy, I played with some of the children in neighboring farms, but almost as soon as I could walk, I was milking goats, herding sheep, and helping with some of the household chores. There wasn't a school in Calabasas until the late 1890s, so what little education I received was from visits to the mission. Most children living on farms were homeschooled. Because I was a son from a previous marriage, Miguel did not allow me to set foot inside the main house. I lived in a shed with the ranch hands, and unfortunately, my mother was treated more like a servant than a wife. Miguel and Espiritu eventually had a child of their own named Marcelina. Miguel loved his daughter very much and saw to it that she always received the best of everything. Life on a farm was difficult for the women. Even though her husband was rich enough to hire help, my mother Espiritu had to cook, clean the house, and hand wash our clothes. The cooking was done on this outdoor horno oven. Our clothes were scrubbed by hand in a wash tub out back, and on some farms the laundry was cleaned down by the local stream or brook, beaten against the rocks and hung out to dry in the sun. Cleaning the house included brushing the dirt floors and dusting for cobwebs. The men spent most of their days tending to the livestock, mending fences, plowing fields, and harvesting crops. In addition to this difficult way of life in the 1800s, Miguel and Espiritu suffered the loss of their daughter, Marcelina. She died at the age of 20 from the disease of smallpox. Miguel Leonis spent much of his time appearing in court to defend his properties. Although he did not speak a word of English, Miguel understood the laws of the land. He spent a lot of his money on attorneys to act in his defense. In 1889, Leonis was returning from a court case in downtown Los Angeles. The settlement went in his favor, so Leonis perhaps was celebrating a bit too much. When they reached the Coinga Pass, he lost his balance and fell from the wagon, and was crushed beneath its wheels. His almost lifeless body was taken to the nearby 6 Mile house, an inn along the way, and was later moved to a home he owned in the Hollywood area. He died there 3 days later. He was 65 years old. There's a legend that Miguel hid his fortune somewhere on El Escorpion Ranchero. This cave, known as the Cavern of the Dead, once used for spiritual practices by the local Indians, is one of the places he might have buried his treasure. After Miguel's death, my mother invited me and my wife, Juana Valenzuela, to live with her at the Adobe. Although Leonis left behind an estate valued at well over $300,000, which would be millions of dollars today, he left very little of that estate to my mother, Espiritu. He called her his housekeeper, who was not entitled to his estate. There was no written proof of their marriage, though they lived together for over 30 years and had a child together. My mother had to hire an attorney to help her reclaim the property. After a long legal struggle, she eventually was granted half of Leonis' estate. My mother was a tough, hard-working individual who stood up for herself in a time when women were told to stay in the background. Shortly after her courtroom victory, she became ill. In April of 1906, she died at her home here in Calabasas. She was 85 years old.
At this time, I was a grown man in my 30s, living with a family of my own. I had many jobs while working on the ranch. I became the town blacksmith and eventually had my own shop directly across the street from here.
I fixed wagon parts, mended shoes and boots, and did various other repairs. I made the shoes for the horses, and a farrier would come in and attach them.
When I moved into the Adobe, I built this tank house to store the wonderful wine made from the grapes grown right here on this property. I learned my winemaking skills from the padres at the San Fernando Mission. I also rebuilt that barn back in 1912.
My wife and I, along with our adopted children, lived here for 16 glorious years before I sold it to the Agora family.
Someone who has dedicated their life to the restoration of this property is Ray Phillips, and he's here to tell you more about that.
Over the years, this rancho went through a series of ownerships. At one time, the Adobe was used as a retirement home, and in 1938 even became a chicken dinner restaurant. And it was rented out to tenants and used as a perfectly fine home right up till the time that the last tenants moved out, which happened to be John Carradine and his sons. The local children came in and wrecked the place. Kathleen Beachy, Kay Beachy is what we called her, she bought the property, and one property across the street, she really wanted to buy up the whole street on both sides, and she was going to make a lovely little mall out of it. The local people learned about it, and of course she wasn't able to buy anything else, and that's what stopped her project. She founded the Leonis Adobe Association and gave us $7,000 to start restoration. We were very fortunate because when the time came, the City of Los Angeles founded the Cultural Heritage Board, and they named the Leonis Adobe as Cultural Heritage Monument #1. By 1965, we had restored the house as it appeared in the 1870s when Miguel Leonis and his Spiritu first moved into it. On May the 21st, 1966, the Adobe was opened to the public as a museum.
I remember when I was a little boy, my mother would take me on long buggy rides over the mountains to go visit the Plummer family in Hollywood.
Eugenio Rafael Plummer was close to my age, and as a teenager, he once visited us on El Escorpion Ranch. While we played outside, he reached under the house to retrieve a ball and was bitten by a scorpion. My mother quickly treated his wound and ultimately saved his life. Just as my mother came to the rescue of the Plummer family, the Leonis Adobe Association came to their rescue in 1983 when they learned that the Plummer family home, the oldest home in Hollywood, was to be demolished. The Leonis Adobe Association arranged to have what remained of the Plummer house relocated to the grounds of the Leonis Adobe. This property was restored under the direction of Ray Phillips.
Well, there you have it. A look at what life in the 1800s was like in the wild western town of Calabasas, preserved right here in my family home, the Leonis Adobe. The Adobe is open to the public for you and your friends to come visit and feel what a fabulous learning experience it is. Now, some say my mother's spirit continues watching over this place. Come see for yourself. I'll be looking for you.